In the past few decades, Europe has become a melting pot of cultures, with tens of millions of immigrants arriving from various parts of the world. Among them, a significant number come from Muslim-majority countries, bringing with them different traditions and diverse perspectives. However, this rapid influx has sparked heated debates and raised complex questions. Why do so many people from the Muslim world choose to settle in the West, especially when they often express dissatisfaction with life here? And why, despite their wealth and shared religious heritage, are countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE not opening their doors to fellow Muslims seeking a new home? Let's find out. To understand the current immigration landscape in Europe, we need to look back at the historical roots of this phenomenon. The waves of immigration to Europe didn't begin overnight. They are the result of decades of complex political, economic, and social factors that have shaped modern European societies. After World War II, Europe faced a massive labor shortage due to the destruction caused by the war and the millions of lives lost. To rebuild their economies, countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, and France turned to migrant labor from their former colonies and beyond. In the 1950s and 60s, programs like the British Commonwealth Immigration Scheme brought in workers from the Caribbean, South Asia, Turkey, and North Africa to help rebuild war-torn nations. These early immigrants were often seen as temporary laborers who would eventually return home. But as they settled and started families, it became clear that they were here to stay. This marked the beginning of a multicultural Europe, which came with both opportunities and challenges. Fast forward to the late 20th and early 21st centuries, and the nature of immigration began to shift. Wars, political instability, and economic hardships in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia led to a new wave of migrants seeking safety and better opportunities. The European Union's relatively open borders and generous asylum policies made it an attractive destination. This surge of new arrivals has brought significant challenges. While the influx of immigrants to Europe has enriched its cultural landscape, it has also posed significant challenges to integration. Integration policies that worked for previous generations are suddenly under strain as new immigrants brought different cultural norms, languages, and religious practices. The struggle between preserving cultural identity and assimilating into a new society has been a central theme in the debate over immigration. For many immigrants from Muslim-majority countries, integrating into the West involves navigating complex cultural, religious, and social dynamics. This has led to tensions, misunderstandings, and, at times, outright conflict between immigrant communities and their host societies. European countries pride themselves on their democratic values, individual freedoms, and secularism. In contrast, many immigrants come from societies where religion plays a central role in public and private life, and where social norms around gender roles, family, and community are markedly different. For instance, debates over the wearing of the hijab or niqab in public spaces, gender segregation in community events, and the role of Sharia law in Muslim communities have all sparked controversy. In countries like France, where secularism is a foundational principle, the banning of religious symbols in public schools and institutions has led to accusations of discrimination and sparked protests among Muslim communities. In other cases, like in Germany or the UK, efforts to accommodate religious practices, such as providing halal food in schools or allowing prayer spaces at work, have led to criticism that Western societies are compromising their own values to appease minority groups. Beyond cultural differences, social and economic segregation has been a significant obstacle to successful integration. Many immigrant communities find themselves living in marginalized areas, often in urban enclaves that are isolated from mainstream society. These neighborhoods, sometimes referred to as ghettos, can become breeding grounds for social alienation and economic disadvantage. High unemployment rates, poor educational outcomes, and limited access to opportunities have created a cycle of poverty and exclusion for many immigrants and their descendants. In some countries, second- and third-generation immigrants face even greater challenges than their parents, struggling to reconcile their heritage with the expectations of the wider society. This disconnection can lead to a sense of disillusionment and, in some cases, radicalization, as young people who feel rejected by both their own community and the broader society seek out alternative identities. Why Europe and not the Muslim world? This choice might seem counterintuitive at first glance, given the shared religious and cultural heritage that could, in theory, make countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or Qatar more appealing destinations. Yet, the reality is far more nuanced, shaped by a web of economic, political, and social factors. One of the most significant reasons why Europe remains an attractive destination for immigrants from the Muslim world is the promise of economic opportunity and social benefits. Despite its challenges, Europe offers a relatively high standard of living, robust social safety nets, and access to education and healthcare that are often far superior to what is available in many immigrants' home countries or even in wealthy Gulf states. In countries like Germany, the UK, and Sweden, immigrants have the opportunity to work in diverse sectors, pursue higher education, and build a better future for themselves and their families. Moreover, European welfare systems provide a level of support, such as unemployment benefits, social housing, and healthcare, that is rarely matched in the Gulf countries. For many, this safety net provides a crucial buffer as they establish themselves in a new country. In contrast, while the Gulf states have booming economies, their labor markets are structured in ways that can be highly restrictive for immigrants. The kafala system, which ties foreign workers to their employers, often limits mobility and exposes them to exploitation and abuse. Furthermore, these countries generally do not offer the same level of social services or long-term stability that immigrants can find in Europe. Workers are often brought in on temporary contracts, with no pathway to permanent residency or citizenship, no matter how long they have lived there. Another critical factor is the stringent immigration policies and social barriers in many Muslim-majority countries. The Gulf states, in particular, are known for their restrictive visa and citizenship policies. While these nations do attract a significant number of workers from countries like India, Pakistan, and the Philippines, these workers are typically confined to low-wage jobs with little chance of upward mobility or social integration. Despite their wealth and development, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar are not welcoming to immigrants looking for permanent resettlement. Citizenship is almost impossible to obtain for non-nationals, and rights for immigrants are limited. In these societies, immigrants are often seen as temporary laborers rather than potential future citizens, and their presence is tolerated only so long as they are needed for the economy. This contrasts sharply with Europe, where, despite rising anti-immigrant sentiments, there are legal pathways for immigrants to become permanent residents and even citizens. The right to family reunification, access to legal representation, and the possibility of naturalization make Europe a more appealing long-term option for those seeking stability and security for their families. Political stability and human rights considerations also play a significant role in why many immigrants choose Europe over other Muslim-majority countries. Despite the challenges Europe faces with right-wing populism and anti-immigrant rhetoric, it still offers a relatively stable political environment compared to many parts of the Muslim world. In contrast, many Muslim-majority countries, including those in the Gulf, have faced criticism for their human rights records. The lack of political freedom, restrictions on speech, and the potential for arbitrary detention or deportation make these countries less appealing to those seeking not just economic opportunity but also personal freedom and security. One of the key reasons wealthy Muslim nations, especially those in the Gulf, do not accommodate large numbers of Muslim immigrants is their economic strategy and labor market structure. These countries rely heavily on a bifurcated labor system, consisting of a small, privileged citizenry and a large population of foreign workers who perform most of the labor-intensive jobs. This system is maintained through the kafala sponsorship system, as we said previously, which ties foreign workers to their employers, severely limiting their rights and freedoms. While this system enables these countries to maintain economic growth and development with a low-cost labor force, it also creates a clear divide between nationals and non-nationals. Foreign workers, who come primarily from South Asia and Southeast Asia, are often seen as temporary labor rather than potential permanent residents or citizens. This economic model leaves little room for the integration or acceptance of immigrants who might seek long-term settlement or citizenship. Furthermore, wealthy Gulf nations have focused on attracting highly skilled professionals for roles in finance, engineering, and management, often from Western countries. Their development strategies aim to position themselves as global economic hubs, attracting the best and brightest to enhance their economic diversification efforts. Refugees and low-skilled immigrants, regardless of their religion, do not fit into this economic vision. Another significant factor is the concern over social cohesion and national identity. The populations of the Gulf nations are relatively small, and the governments are deeply invested in maintaining a strong sense of national identity and social stability. The prospect of accepting large numbers of immigrants, especially those from politically unstable regions, could potentially disrupt this delicate social fabric. Many of these countries are also deeply conservative, and the ruling families maintain strict control over religious and social life. The introduction of large numbers of immigrants with different cultural and political backgrounds could challenge the status quo and lead to social unrest. For instance, the Arab Spring uprisings that swept across the Middle East in the early 2010s heightened the sensitivity of these governments to the potential for political dissent. As a result, they have become even more cautious about allowing in people who might bring with them different political ideas or alignments. For many Western nations, the idea of multiculturalism has been both a guiding principle and a contentious topic. The post-World War II era saw Western Europe embrace multiculturalism as a response to the horrors of nationalism and racism. This ethos, grounded in the values of tolerance, human rights, and diversity, was intended to create inclusive societies where people from various cultural and religious backgrounds could coexist peacefully. However, as the number of immigrants from the Muslim world grew, especially during the late 20th and early 21st centuries, cracks began to appear in the multicultural model. Many European countries, which had previously seen themselves as homogeneous or secular, struggled to reconcile their liberal values with the increasing visibility of Islamic practices and beliefs. The promise of multiculturalism, to create harmonious, integrated societies, has, in many cases, been undermined by a lack of effective integration policies. Instead of fostering mutual understanding, the coexistence of disparate communities has sometimes led to cultural isolation and parallel societies. This, in turn, has fueled tensions and misunderstandings between native populations and immigrant communities, contributing to a growing sense of unease and skepticism about the viability of multiculturalism. Across Europe, political parties and movements have risen to prominence by exploiting fears related to immigration and the perceived erosion of national identity. Parties such as the National Rally in France, the Alternative for Germany, AfD, and the Freedom Party in Austria have gained significant support by arguing that the influx of Muslim immigrants threatens the social fabric and cultural heritage of their respective countries. In response to this growing backlash, mainstream political parties have been forced to reconsider their positions on immigration and integration. Some have adopted more restrictive immigration policies, while others have emphasized the need for stronger assimilation measures to ensure that newcomers adopt the values and norms of their host societies. However, these policy shifts have done little to address the underlying concerns of both native populations and immigrant communities, often exacerbating divisions rather than healing them. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this video insightful, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.